Hello,
Hey there.
how are you?
Fine. We're being recorded, so if you want to stop the recording, we can reset
I
that.
keep I keep forgetting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest in an ongoing series sponsored by the California Library Association. It is named after the person in whom I am getting grammatically all messed up here. We had a bequest that gave us this, and the bequest was in honor of Ursula Meyer. The slide you were looking at gives you some quick background on the session. I'm going to stop for about 20 or 30 seconds so you can look at that. It'll probably be the only 20 or 30 seconds of silence you have in this whole version. And the whole reason of showing this slide is for those of you watching the archive version that you know what you're getting yourself into. So I'll go silent for a bit, come back in, and then we'll get running. Bless you. Very cordial. They have cross-country sneeze. All right, I'm going to take this slide down. If anybody's watching the archive version, you need more, simply freeze that. You can look at it a little bit more, but everybody on this call is pretty much familiar with what we're doing, so we're going to jump right into it. I'm delighted to have with us today Sarah Lamdan from the Freedom to Read Foundation under the auspices, it has been until recently, I guess, under the auspices of ALA, the American Library Association. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and we'll get the conversation going. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I told Paul that I would start with an eye-catching image, so I'm going to share my screen really quickly. I feel like this is the most relevant eye-catching image for the week. Um, it will now, wait, I want to scroll down. Not this person talking, but this headline. Llano County library book removals are allowed after the U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear the challenge. This is the big, I know, this is the big library freedom to read, intellectual freedom news for the week. So I present that mostly to welcome you to ask questions about it, even if those questions are what does this mean or what is next. But according to the overview for this session, it was a packed overview that included like First Amendment, privacy, FOIA, like it had everything in it. So I have topical information about everything. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the information and allow for conversation. As Paul said, whenever you feel like chiming in, we'll stop. It'll be a stop and start, and we'll get through as much of it as we can, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. I feel it's imperative to tell you why I'm qualified to answer questions. I am the deputy director at the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom. And I'm a librarian. I've been a librarian for over 20 years. I'm also a licensed attorney. And I worked as a law professor, and I called what I did information law, but I taught classes about administrative law, data privacy, access to information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I am both a library insider and kind of somebody with who can give a little bit more legal context for things that libraries face. And I run a program called Law for Librarians, which some of you may be involved with or may have heard of. I'm happy to answer questions about that too.
We've
So,
already actually got one in from Jill. She's
yeah,
asking,
there's
what
already.
can other libraries do to offer support to Llano County library friends?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I also want to give my own plug for the librarians. I see some of you are already seeing the documentary. I've seen it many times. It is, I think, the best illustration of what we're facing right now and where it comes from. It's such a brilliant and wonderful documentary. I encourage everybody to see it. You will not regret it, I promise.
And those of you that are
But
taken in by your viewing of that and see Amanda Jones in there, we actually had Amanda as a guest on the Ursula Meyer series earlier this year. So you can go back and get a 90-minute thing of her talking about advocacy too, in addition to the book she's got out there.
yeah, I can't, I mean, I don't want to limit the people who are great spokespeople about this topic. Like, I don't want to leave anyone out, but she is just a spectacular, she's brave and she is in the fight and she's a wonderful resource and spokesperson for just libraries. So you guys, that's also a gift that y'all got to spend time with her. So I'm glad to hear it. So, the question that Jill asked is a good one. It is, what can other libraries do to offer support to Llano County Library friends? Um, so I want to clarify the Fifth Circuit holding applies to Llano County. It applies to all public libraries in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And especially right now, the plaintiffs in the case, like Leela Green Little, who is both a library, I think she's still in library school, but she's training to be a librarian, and she's just been a huge activist for libraries. I am sure she would appreciate all of the, if you want to send her a note or send the library a note. People do entire postcard campaigns around supporting various libraries and people. So I'm sure they would love to hear from you. I know that the librarians and library workers who are at the epicenter of these fights feel very isolated. It is very isolating to feel like you're being attacked by your community. And then when people in your community stand silent or support those attacks against you. So anything you can do to reach out, even if it's just like, hey, an email like, hey, I'm a librarian from California, and I just wanted to send you my support and let you know that we're all behind you, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do legally right now. The best thing we can do right now is fight against similar types of pushes to remove books in our own states. So, if you are in a community in California, I know not even California is immune. I live in New York, and we're definitely not immune. There are book challenges and book removals going on all over the state, and I know you all know that about California as well. So, Stan, going and helping those communities as well, if they're having like a board meeting or they're having some sort of rally, if a letter to a certain lawmaker or a city official, is asked for, just really throw your support in there. Get out there, get everybody in your community out there, because the more of us that show up, the stronger the fight is.
I'll add a couple of things here that are ongoing themes with this Ursula Meyer series. What we try to do here is have people like Sarah coming in and answering the kind of questions that you're asking, but also making the point that through the conversation you have with your colleagues, if you're here live today, following up with people that are on the call that are of a like mind with you and seeing what you can do in your own community. Take that example of what we're talking about in Llano County and see if there's something closer to home where you and others can organize together. And remember, California Library Association is strongly into advocacy. So if you're looking for ins and you don't want to be feeling like you're the only person out there doing it, become active in CLA, become part of the Legislative and Advocacy Committee, become part of what we do here at the Ursula Meyer series. And Deborah, who's on the call, Deborah Doyle, local, regional, and nationally known for her advocacy work, had president, tell me if I'm getting this right, Deborah, this year you're in your second of 2 years.
President of United for Libraries.
Thank you. I always mess up the title, so I'm glad you jumped in there. So Deborah's accessible. David McFadden, who's on the call, is very active in CLA. You come into these things or you watch them in the archive version and you say, oh, I could go out and find that person, and then I'm not alone. And we encourage that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that you all are even here today, these little things that we do, just these little ways that we show up, that's how we build the freedom to read community. And that's how and then that's how we support libraries. So, yeah, people often, it's funny, before I worked in ALA, one of the reasons I came to work at ALA is because as a library, I never understood how to get involved in ALA. I was always like, why is it so hard to get involved? And what I realize now is that it's really just about showing up. Like if you show up at an ALA meeting and go into a committee room, they're going to ask you to do something, or they're going to be excited that you're there and they're going to pull you on in. And it's funny now that I realize, I'm like, well, gee, I mean, I don't mind working at ALA, but also like I could have been involved without even getting without working there. I didn't even realize. So much of being involved and being supportive is just showing up and being willing to be put to work, be asked to do something. So yeah, and really thank you to Deborah Doyle for all the work you do as well. And everybody else on the call.
Pauline, Deborah, I'm sorry, Sarah and Deborah, there's a follow-up from Pauline asking if we have a list at CLA meeting, are we keeping track of challenges so there's a list we can refer to? Sarah, ALA does something like that, don't they?
Yeah, so ALA creates resources. We keep a huge master database, and we also work with other organizations like Pen America, to kind of keep a robust collection about legislative challenges, court cases, instances of censorship that just happen because that happens a lot right now. So if you ever want more information about particular, number statistics, affected libraries, do not hesitate to reach out. Here, I can put my email here. And we can direct you to where you need to go. We're really like, especially now, we're really all part of this fight together. That is something that has changed a little bit about the Office for Intellectual Freedom in the last few months. We've built a lot of bridges because we can't win this fight alone, and we want to support communities with as much support as possible. And that means all of us working together, which has been a real joy. So I love that you're also a member of Pen America. Exactly. Like that's what we do. We, show up, join, be a part. I really appreciate it. Because I know this is not the way to start a conversation. It's more of like an ending, but I do think that we will win. We've won before, right? In the end of the day, the people who censor books always come out, history doesn't view them well, and the freedom to read always prevails. So it's a messy time right now, but I do believe that there are more people who champion the freedom to read than champion censorship. So sorry, I swallowed wrong and now I have no more water. Like
I've got some here if you need it.
I had the very last of my water and now and I choked on it. So But I did create like slides. Um so I have a lot of topics I can cover. That's not to say I have to like stick to these topics. But do you have an interest in me kind of giving a little bit of like background about like what we consider censorship to be and how kind of some of the legal underpinnings of that? Um like thumbs up or
Can I say I'm interested in the legal challenges from the right side of history?
Well, lucky for you,
What
that's
can we do more of?
okay. Yeah, you know what? Let me
Like
see.
examples of things that worked.
Yeah. Here, why don't I'm looking I'm gonna try to like get us to a place. Um, you know what? I'll skip ahead to I I will start by telling you a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing. Like I want to tell you, I want to explain briefly what the negative things are, so then I can explain how we can fight them. Okay, so I'm going to start, but as I said, this is just because there are slides on the screen does not mean that I can unshare them and we can come back to this conversational format just as easily. Um, so here, I'm going to take us to, okay. I'm going to take us all the way to, okay. So I'm not going to hit all of these. I just am going to, it just to give us some context. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Oh, no. Why? Here. Blah, 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 blah. There. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the legislative things that we're seeing, some of the executive things that we're seeing, and some of the court things that we're seeing. And I'm going to talk about them in very kind of a high level, broad sweep. And then I'm going to shut the slides so we can talk about those things. And then I'll pull them up and talk about our action items or what we can do. Does that, yeah? Yeah. Okay. So, um, what we've been seeing a lot in the last 2 years as far as like bad things, right? We've been seeing states feeling emboldened to pass laws. So remember, legislation comes out of Congress or in your state Senate, your House, whatever the two, the bicameral system is in your state. And what we're seeing out of those bodies are laws that are restricting the acquisition of material deemed sexually explicit in school libraries. So these are laws that say, um, schools can't get certain types of materials, right? And when they use phrases like sexually explicit, because that sounds, that ignites, of course, I wouldn't want my children to see sexually explicit things, but the books they're actually going after are like Captain Underpants or a book about Anne Frank where there's a girl with a backless dress on walking in a forest. Like they're taking these terms, since these terms don't have any legal definition, they're taking these terms and using them to mean just whatever they want, right? The other thing they're doing is limiting like DEI, CRT, LGBTQIA, right? We've heard of Florida's like don't say gay law, and there are a lot of laws about having DEI and CRT trainings and materials, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or critical race theory, these kind of taglines that have been used to talk about like broadening the scope of people's stories that we tell, right? Telling stories about people who have historically been marginalized in society and who are still marginalized in society, right? So there's also been kind of censorship and limitation there. There are these bills called Parental Bill of Rights, Parents' Bill of Rights bills, saying that basically give parents much more of an ability to kind of do censorship in their schools, right? Because they take this idea of parental rights, which we all agree parents should have a right to raise their kids as they wish, but they take it from like me as a parent having a certain type of right to me being able to impose my decisions on the entire community, on the entire school or the entire library, right? Another one is criminalizing certain things that librarians do, so threatening to take criminal action against library workers who do certain things. Historically, library workers and teachers there have been protections built into laws so that like a teacher could teach a sex education class or a librarian can hand out a book about biology without having to worry about being arrested, right? Or having a police interaction. So states are doing away with those protections. And then also laws that are taking away funding from libraries. So I saw that there were there's a question. Um, Yes, it is true. If we can transform fury into positive action, we'll be on the right track. So I hope that these legislative trends, I don't want them to infuriate you, but I do want them to concern you because they are concerning. So we are concerned about these legislative trends, right? And then let me see, on on the positive side, and this has happened in California, we have right to read legislation. So how many of you were excited and supported right to read legislation in California? Here, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see. Yeah, like, so right to read legislation has been popping up all over the country. I will say California is one of the first states to have a really robust right to read law. And right to read laws do things like protect library workers. I know California's does require policies to be in place so that there's a right way to review books, to say, oh, instead of just taking books off shelves, they have to say, oh, I don't want this book in my library, so I'm going to fill out this form, and there's going to be a formal review process that involves experts and people in the community instead of just one parent saying, "Oh, I don't like these books, take them off the shelves," right? So that's another protection. And then California's has explicitly language about not censoring books based on like LGBTQIA status or books about, people based on their human characteristics, right? Basically saying if civil rights law protects you, books should not like you should not be subject to censorship or the stories of your life should not be subject to censorship. So those that's like kind of the positive flip side of all of this negative legislation, and California's done it. Like, good job. Does anybody have any question about these legislative trends that we've been seeing or California's right to read law? Okay, so Pauline asks, what is ALA doing to protect the professional status of librarians? Look what's happened to the deprofessionalization of teachers. So that's a really important and good question. Know that, ALA is the professional organization that it's the largest professional organization that represents libraries in the United States. And we have an accreditation program, right, for library schools, and we have I see gritting of teeth. Yeah, we have these
So do teachers.
exactly,
And look
exactly.
what happened to them.
Right. And we're seeing the deprofessionalization of libraries across the country, right? People, when libraries are leaving, especially if they're leaving because of censorship challenges, they're being replaced by people who are not library professionals who don't have that accredited education that, that we try to ascribe and hold dear. So one of the things that we're doing is we are trying to educate as many library workers in every state, regardless of their, professional and academic history. And we were doing that anyway, right? We don't want to penalize people who work in libraries and who couldn't afford or couldn't have the time to, get there. Like if you're working in a library, we want you to have a wealth of information about how libraries work, and we want you to feel competent and confident. Um, so Nice. Yeah, Kay adds, California has protection for school libraries with the SB 48 Act and the FAIR Act, and both of those require the inclusion of marginalized communities in curriculum and library collections. Um, yeah, exactly. And library deprofessionalization has been an ongoing trend. I know, I'm new enough to the ALA that I am like you. I've seen our profession mostly from outside of the ALA for all these years, and yes, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
you've worked at law libraries, right? So you saw how a lot of those just went gone, and wasn't there like a library in somewhere in the Northeast that did an all online law library, and then they were selling that to law firms? Was that a
yep,
thing? Yeah.
yeah, and the AALL is also struggling. Like AALL was always my home institution, and it's hard right now. Um, Yeah, and we are on top of the situation in Redlands School District also. We know that the right to read law isn't a cure-all, right? And we still have to be very vigilant. So as I was saying about the education piece, we are doing a program called Law for Librarians, and we are training library workers, regardless of their, affiliation status. And we're trying to get library workers from schools and public libraries to, and academic libraries and special libraries. I don't want to leave anyone out, but we're trying to get a wide breadth of library workers in every state. And we are giving them like a crash course on intellectual freedom, on legal issues that they might see in their libraries. And then we are sending them out in their communities to train other library workers. So far, they've trained almost 7,000 people. And we're introducing our second cohort now. I know that there's so many library workers that 7,000 is kind of a tip of the iceberg, but the program is growing, and we encourage anyone who's interested in becoming a trainer to reach out, because we are going to try to spread the knowledge of intellectual freedom across the whole library ecosystem.
Sure. For those who are curious, what's the fast track to getting into a program like that or getting that level of training?
Um, well, the first time we did it, we had an in-person weekend retreat in Chicago that had like almost 200 library workers at it. And we did 2-hour seminars on First Amendment law, First Amendment law for minors, privacy law, just all aspects of intellectual freedom. And it was amazing, but it was also a lot. So now what we've done is we're creating webinars so that they can be kind of done more piecemeal. But in order to become a trainer, you have to complete all nine. There are 9 of them. You have to complete them. And then we put you in a community, like an online community with all of the other trainers. And we're going to start dividing all the trainer groups out by region so that there can also be like regional collectives where everybody can get together and talk. And it's been like, I was worried that people wouldn't communicate with each other, but they work together. Like it's been really amazing and
Sure.
inspiring.
If there's somebody who's watching the archive version of this, and they want to know how to get in touch with this, can I just give them audibly into the recording here your email address again?
Yes, of course. So
Yeah,
my
so
email address, oh, sorry.
yeah, it's SLAMDAN at ALA.org. So if you're watching this, you want to pursue this with Sarah, we're looking for people like you.
Yeah. And I will be happy to see you. Yeah, everybody, like seriously, it is a real it and so one thing I always say, because it is true, is it is not just important, it's a really feel good exercise too. And also everybody, because what I learned, my friends in Rhode Island passed a right to read law there. And one of the people who was kind of at the helm of the effort said what really surprised her and delighted her was how joyful it was, right? All of these people, even though it doesn't look like it, over 70% of all people in America love libraries. Like libraries are just seen as a common, unadulterated good. So to give people an opportunity to come out for libraries and to do something, um, it makes people feel really, really good. So you have this big group of library workers who are just feeling like activated and doing things. And it is a joyful and lovely experience in a very warm community. So yeah, we encourage you to get involved, reach out to me. I do apologize in advance if my return rate isn't as fast as I want it to be. We've had a lot of shift in ALA, which has led to a temporary kind of catch up period. But I'm getting back on top of things, and I really do look forward to seeing all of you in the future, whether through L4L or ALA engagement, or even if you just have a question about intellectual freedom, or the worst case scenario, you're having a problem and you need some sort of assistance, and it's an intellectual freedom problem. Um, yeah. So, does anybody have any question about legislation?
Sure. Before we do that, let me go back for just a little bit more detail. Oh, I actually saw a hand go up. So let's do the hand first and then come back. I want us to look at a couple of specific stories you can tell that answer what Pauline was asking. What are some of the positive things we're seeing out there? But first, Jill's got her hand up. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, this just came up like I think last week. Sarah, are you familiar with the Code for Lib group?
Yes.
So you saw the thing from Carnegie Mellon where they
No. I know I've been involved in Code for Live with privacy stuff, but I haven't been able to keep up to date. What's going on?
Oh, here, let me paste the email in the chat. So basically, they have their yearly conference at Code for Lib. The current education administration asked Carnegie Mellon, which is the host institution, to do an audit of all conferences that they're having there for,
Oh gosh, I did hear about this, but I
yeah,
didn't know it was Code for Lib.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there may have been other conferences at Carnegie Mellon that also got hit with this. But the Code for Lib is the group. And because it brings up how the current administration is using what, you know,
Ugh.
civil rights legislation, I wondered if, this was on ALA's radar and this kind of a widespread thing that is being seen.
Unfortunately, yeah, I think that this is a because now I'm realizing this one is different than the last. Like, oh yeah, I didn't know it was Code for Lib because it was a whole different program that also got canceled at a different institution. Yeah, it is. And actually we just made connection with ACRL, the OIF office, to kind of come up to speed in the current college and research library ecosystem. So look out in 2026 for more responses to this. I'm actually going to send this right now, like as we are on the call. I'm going to send this to all of the people, all of the stakeholders in that discussion, because this is a huge problem. And this is now, I think, the second or third time I've seen it. So
Oh, really?
Sure. For
Yeah.
those who are not familiar, I've got to admit, I'm not well versed in what you're talking about here. Give us a quick summary so we've got that audibly and talk about the actions that advocates can take to support positive responses to this.
um okay, so what we are seeing is due to the executive orders that have come out in 2025, some of them related to not featuring work that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion, or not allowing research that involves gender identity, right? There are all of these restrictive executive orders that are coming out. And the problem is that what executive orders are is it's like a memo from your boss telling you to do something, right? The president is the boss of the executive branch of government, and the executive branch of government is full of agencies, right? You have like the cabinet, which is like the Department of Defense and and the Department of Education and all of these departments, and then there are all these sub-departments, right? So there's a ton of departments that get this memo from the boss, and the boss says, we're not doing this anymore. Like, I think there was some sort of messaging yesterday. It wasn't an executive order, but it was like for the Department of State, we're like, we're not going to use Calibri font anymore. We're just going to use Times New Roman, right? And it is these little directives. So when you get a directive from the big boss, the president, you implement it, right? So the problem is where do universities get a lot of their research support and funding? They get their research support and funding from agencies, from grant providing agencies like IMLS or like NIH or like NEA, right? National Endowment for the Arts, National Institute of Health, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, right? So then the way this hits us on the ground is that entities that get their funding from federal government agencies get nervous and they comply in advance, right? Nobody's directly told them, or maybe they have heard from their administrators, you have to do this, but they go ahead and do it anyway because they need to preserve their funding, right? And I get you've seen what happens to universities that catch the administration's eye. They get extorted for a lot of money. And they get into all sorts of legal trouble. So some institutions are kind of doing this. They're canceling talks. They're canceling certain programs. They're monitoring what goes into their instructors' syllabi. There's a sliding scale of how schools are responding to this, but some of them are canceling library conferences and library symposia and library events. Yeah.
So what we're looking at, and this is from the chat, for those of you that are watching the archive version, the background everybody's working off is this memo that starts off with, I'm writing to share my sincere apologies and let you know that unfortunately we're no longer able to host the Code for Lib conference at Carnegie Mellon University. And then it goes into the reasons that Sarah's just been addressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the CSU is also has a lawsuit against um one of their grant programs using the same Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, which, as you know, we all know, was supposed to be legislation to help minorities advance, and now the current administration is using this as discrimination essentially against white people. And so anytime they see these DEI programs, they're using this legislation kind of backwards. We had another memo again from the CSU chancellor that cited this same Department of Education Office of Civil Rights for some other scholarship programs. The CSU chancellor's office is fighting it, though, because it is an organization that is in our favor to do so, and we have the protections here in California. But this one, I guess Carnegie Mellon University, because of this audit from the legislative office, decided to go through every program that they offered to host. And in this case, the Code for Lib, specifically, there is a scholarship that Code for Lib offers for underrepresented groups to come and attend. And this email says that if Code for Lib would consider removing that scholarship from their programming, Carnegie Mellon would agree to host again. So this is like, they're dating right out.
Putting this in the context of what we're trying to do today with the Ursula Meyer's workshop here, we're sharing information about how to be a better advocate on behalf of libraries and library communities, or the communities that we serve. And you're talking about a situation that's well underway. What are 2 or 3 concrete steps that you're all taking as advocates that others might adapt in a similar situation?
I mean, I've been lucky to be part of organizations that are standing up to this. So Code for Lib, the following conversation, Code for Lib said, we're gonna figure something else out. We're gonna keep offering the scholarship. And then again, the CSU Chancellor's Office, has been giving updates that they're fighting this. But both of these are organizations that are not reliant heavily on federal funds. It's the big joke in the California schools here that, the UCs get tons and tons of federal funding, the CSUs not so much. So we've, in a way, being the poorer consortia, we're a little more protected from having to give in for financial reasons to some of this. Um, so I've been lucky that I've been able to rely on the organizations that I'm in right now. I don't know how other people are facing these challenges when they're in more vulnerable positions.
Pauline has made some interesting comments in the chat talking about how infuriating this is and wondering about what's the cost of us to all of us in seeing what's happening here. What are you and your colleagues, and same question for Sarah, what are you and your colleagues doing to channel that fury into something that's productive and positive and effective in responding to what we're facing?
We do drag story hour as much as we can. We've got our San Francisco bubble, and every time I leave it, I'm a little afraid. But I do see people who are being thoughtful and decent in other parts of the country. You just have to find those little enclaves because they're not so little is the thing. We have to fight complacency and the whole idea of, well, I'm comfortable in my life. This doesn't affect me until it does. That's the thing. People don't act until it does affect you. One of the things I'm doing, it's something that I put in the chat as well, is the Association of Children's Librarians of Northern California. One of the people there is associated with Diverse Book Finder database. So that's something that I got involved with. I've trained to become a coder from all summer, all the last 4 months. And I'm really excited about doing that because the people who are being affected are kids.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
these are our future legislators and these are our future leaders. And they know better. They're the ones that are coming up and speaking up at the library board meetings and the supervisor meetings and all of these and in Congress even. Um, the more we can support our youth and dismantling the Department of Education, we have to answer that. That's why I keep going back to that. But there are, little ways that are not so little that become big ways to advocate for our children. I've been a children's advocate for 20 plus years, and they're, out of my cold, dead hands, man. It's not going to stop.
Deborah Doyle makes a great point that we make over and over again in our Advocacy 101 sessions, and that is an important part of this, folks, is talking to legislators and administrators at all levels. In the session we did last month, we did it on site in Riverside at the CLA conference. We also did it in an archive version that is up on YouTube on the CLA channel. It talks about talking to legislators and administrators, but not just doing it as a member of library staff, bringing in people in the community. Because Deborah's got this wonderful equation she cites so often about one library representative being let's see, the equation is you bring in one, what she calls a civilian, so somebody's not being paid by a library to do stuff. That's equivalent to 100 of us who are paid to do this going into the legislators. So you talk to your legislators, you talk to administrators, bring in people in the community who are affected, make it clear to these elected officials, these are the people who are voting for you, and this is what's important to them. Let's circle back to the one of the two questions still floating out there, Jill and Sarah, a couple of stories that draw on legal protections, laws that we need to know about as advocates that show how we've been effective in combating what you're describing here.
Wait, what's the question?
Question is a good time story, something that draws on the law and says, here's how we use the law to respond to some of the challenges we're facing, some of the things that are making it difficult for us to have libraries function the way that they're meant to function in their communities.
Right. I mean, I think passing affirmative legislation is one. That's why I gave it as my first example. But you already, in California in particular, you already have it taken care of. And then the other, so when you talk about the law, right, you're talking about the three branches of government. You're talking about legislation, which you guys already check. And then getting rid of, making sure no bad laws get passed. So that goes to what Deborah was saying about like lobbying, keeping lawmakers aware of what's going on in libraries and keeping them, making sure that they're champions of libraries. So going and updating and talking to them, making sure that like the worst, because I lobbied in New York as an individual um a couple years ago, and like the worst is when you go into a lawmaker's office and they don't know they're like, oh, I didn't know about any of that, right? So a lot of it is just creating awareness, keeping it in front of them, and reminding people about how important it is. Yeah, like Pauline said, an elevator speech. And then the other thing is so that's lawmaking. When censorship does happen, sometimes as a result of the law and sometimes not, then what happens as a result is somebody sues, right? We have litigation. So I have a couple slides about showing what that looks like. Hold on, I'll show you that, and then we can kind of move from legislation as a tool to courts as a tool and where we are now with those. Let's see. Share. So yeah, we already talked about this, but this is like remember, those executive orders, while they don't bind states. So executive orders tell, the president, the boss, tells his agencies what to do. States oftentimes follow suit, and they're doing that. They're doing that. That is happening, and we're seeing that happen. And that's kind of what we're seeing, with the universities as well. Like, okay, we're going to go ahead and follow suit. We're going to do what they're doing. Because we like to get federal funding, right? And we like the favor of the federal government, or we just like what they're doing. And so we're going to do it. So what about the courts, right? Courts interpret the legislation. So, and when there's a bad law that comes out, the way you fight it is through the courts, or you lobby your lawmakers and ask them to change the law or repeal it, right? But oftentimes, if an entity has just passed a bad law, it's going to be really hard to get them to go in the next session and just get rid of it, right? Like they just did it, they just passed it. So oftentimes, what happens is a lawsuit happens. A lawsuit can also happen when there's no legislation, but when somebody actually does censorship, when somebody takes books off of a library shelf, or when I say somebody, it has to be a government entity. Like you can take whatever books off your personal shelf that you want. But when a public library takes books off of its shelf, that poses a constitutional challenge, a constitutional issue. So that's another way to get a lawsuit. And federal lawsuits start in the district court in your state. So the U.S. District Court is like the lowest level court. Then it goes up through the Circuit Court of Appeals, and then it goes to the Supreme Court, which is what we just saw with the Lano case. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declined to hear it. The Supreme Court doesn't have to hear your case. And it chose not to hear Little versus Llano County, which is why we are where we are. So currently what we're seeing federal district court lawsuits responding to unconstitutional state laws, right? That legislation that is unconstitutional, and also people just doing censorship things, right? People banning books or removing them, or, otherwise keeping people from information. And we're seeing mixed outcomes in the courts of appeal. So when those cases happen, generally they come out in favor of the people who are seeking, or who want to preserve the freedom to read. Generally, we win when we go to court. Sometimes these cases end up in the Court of Appeals. They get appealed. So when we win, the state or the lawmaker or the government official might appeal the case to the Court of Appeals. And in that court, we've been having, in the circuit courts, we've been having a mixed outcome. Like when Lano was in the Fifth Circuit, at first it got a very good opinion, right? They said you have to put the books back on the shelf. But then a new lawyer took up the case and asked to hear it en banc. So they asked to hear it with the whole court. They said, we feel like there's some dispute about this opinion. Let's hear it again. And that second opinion came out very negatively for librarians, or for libraries, and for the freedom to read. So a similar situation is happening in Florida right now, where Two cases were heard in two different district courts. One of them came out in favor of the right to read and said, hey, this is censorship, you can't do it. And the other one did not. And so now those will probably be resolved in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is their circuit court. So we're seeing things happen all over the country. And we might see some of those cases go up to the Supreme Court. We'll have to wait and see what happens. It could take years. Litigation is very slow. Legislation can be fast. It can happen, in one legislative session. Litigation takes a really long time to get from that district court to the Supreme Court, takes years, and a lot of back and forth. So this is what it looks like. I'll show you what it looks like when litigation progresses. And then we can have a conversation about the current status of where we are with litigation and what we can do. So what happens in a lot of situations is a state lawmaker will pass a bill, right? A law will be sponsored and supported, and it will go to the governor's desk and the governor will sign it. So this is just a pretend bill, right? Let's say it's Senate Bill 000, an act to limit the acquisition of explicit or harmful materials in school libraries and to establish procedures that allow for books to be removed from shelves. That law might be unconstitutional, right? It hasn't been tested. We don't know. This law feels like it could lead to censorship, and censorship is unconstitutional. So the bill passes, signed by the governor. The law is implemented in a particular library. So the law passes, it seems fishy, and then a library system in, I don't know, in Los Angeles decides to implement the new law, right? So that means that they stop acquiring materials that they think are explicit, which who knows what that means. And they set up procedures to allow books to be removed from shelves. Makes sense because that law passed, right? It's a law. So a library implements the law, and then somebody comes to find a book that they want to get, and they can't get it because the library has implemented this law. So they sue on behalf of their minor children. They say, uh-oh, this is censorship. I can't get the materials I want. And they file a lawsuit. So that's oftentimes what litigation looks like. It happens after legislation. It kind of follows legislation or an executive order or something else that happens that leads to some sort of unconstitutional activity. However, that's not always the way it works. So two phrases that get thrown around a lot are facial challenges in the court versus as applied challenges. So I just wanted to talk, because when it comes to censorship, this is important. It's a difference. In this pipeline from legislation, from the passage of the law, from the enactment of the law, there are two different opportunities where somebody might file a lawsuit claiming that there's unlawful censorship. The first is right after the law is enacted. So it could be that the law gets passed and immediately someone sues and says, this law is unconstitutional on its face. We don't even have to implement it. It is so obviously a law about censorship that it is unconstitutional. We have to make sure it doesn't even get implemented because it would deprive people of their rights. That's a harder case to make. So oftentimes what people do is they wait until one of those libraries actually starts pulling books off the shelf. Because then once the censorship happens, it's much easier to prove that the law is unconstitutional because they can say, look, here's an instance where somebody actually wanted to get material and they couldn't because of the law, right? The law led to this library taking books off the shelves. That's unconstitutional. So that's called an as applied challenge. And those are different. But they often lead to the same ends. And those ends, one thing that we talk about a lot when we talk about this litigation is expensive. With whether it's an as applied challenge or a facial challenge, litigating against litigating in favor of censorship costs states and communities a ton of money. So when localities like Llano County or Escambia in Florida, when they make the choice to do censorship and somebody sues them, they rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars, right? in litigation fees. And that's money that could have been spent on more books and services, could have been spent on more library workers and supports, right? Instead of supporting the community, those taxpayer funds are used on lawyers for this censorship litigation, which oftentimes they ultimately lose. So that's litigation. There are a lot of specific cases that I'm happy to talk about if you have questions. But does anybody have any questions about that side of intellectual freedom in the
I
law?
do, I do. So I'm sorry. I feel
No.
like I'm taking over. Um, um, in terms of the cost, so if something is blatantly unconstitutional, um, can is that going to depend on how good the lawyer is to quash it, or it's just going to cost what it's going to cost because of that's how our court systems are?
Generally, it's just going to cost what it's going to cost, but it is important to get lawyers that are familiar with constitutional law and
Hmm.
oftentimes with like municipal law. A lot of times it's like the county or city lawyer that ends up doing these. So when there is a lawyer on the case, one thing that we do a lot as the ALA or the Freedom to Read Foundation is um, we help inform legal counsel about how libraries work because a lot of lawyers will be assigned to these cases and they don't know that there are policies in place for collection development. They don't know how a book is chosen or how they don't know the difference between censorship and weeding. Like we see that a lot. They just don't have any understanding about how librarianship works. So another service that we provide as an entity is to try to train as many lawyers as we can about how libraries work because more and more of them, unfortunately, are facing these censorship challenges. And another problem that we run into, exactly, Deborah put it, Deborah summarized it in the chat. There are cases that are, so there aren't an unlimited number of lawyers. And they're actually like we've actually hit our limit numerous times on like finding effective counsel who can do this work. So it's important to focus on cases where there's actual, where there's a possibility to have a fruitful discussion and prevail. And that's not always the case. Like we hear from a lot of libraries and library workers about, situations where they're worried that there is going to be censorship, but no censorship has actually happened, or something divisive happens in a board meeting but like you can't there is no actual First Amendment violation, right? Nobody's restraining anybody's right to read. Um, so it is about finding the best case and also plaintiffs. It's really hard and people have different ideas. Like there are all sorts of different parties that file lawsuits in these cases. Um, so it's not just library. So in fact, it's never unless the library worker has been harassed and they're suing for slander or libel or like something like that. It's never the libraries that file the lawsuit. It is library users because the library worker is not the one who's having their rights abridged, right? It's the person who wants to go to the library and get a book and then cannot. So it oftentimes is a parent on behalf of their minor child. That is kind of unfortunately, the most common plaintiff in these cases. I hate that they involve children at all, and that just shows kind of like you're getting at, Pauline, like that shows how problematic and why the situation is problematic. It's all about kids. So oftentimes parents will sue. But there have been situations where authors have sued because their books have been taken off the shelf. So if you look at like Peter Parnell and In Tango Makes Three, that's a book about two real penguins who hatch an egg together. Like it's the sweetest little picture book. Um, but he has sued because his book has been removed from shelves. So there are interesting strategies, legal strategies that are being employed. But Deborah did point out, where did you, I saw it. Um, yeah, oh no, it was Jill. Right. Jill recalls the story of Rosa Parks, right? So the story of Rosa Parks is right. She was on a bus and she didn't move to the back and she was arrested, like, she got in trouble. But that case took a lot of buildup and a lot of work to even organize to create the perfect plaintiff. That's what they call it, a perfect plaintiff, right? To yeah, Rosa Parks was actually working with the ACLU, and I think also the NAACP, and um she was convinced to do that, right? She was brave enough to say, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll risk an arrest in order to bring this case to court." And that happens a lot in a lot of situations. And it happens for all manner of causes. There's not one political persuasion that has that tactic and that uses that strategy. Everybody uses it. There are perfect plaintiffs across all divides. But it is true that when you think about filing any sort of constitutional law claim that might go to the Supreme Court, especially, you are conscientious about where you put the best, most effective lawyers, where you put their time.
Let's be explicit here for people watching the archive version. This whole conversation came out of a very simple, straightforward bit of advice that Deborah offered. And it's a great thing to write down if you're an advocate and trying to figure out where to go with this. Pick the right case and the best plaintiff. And that's what Sarah has been addressing for the last few minutes. An idea that Deborah said, pick the right case, the best plaintiff. And then Jill jumped in with Rosa Parks is a great example of that. So that's the context for you. And Sarah, you've got another question, I think, from Kate about 1982 Board of Education.
So I'm going to read the question and then I'll answer it. So, does the 1982 Board of Education Island Trees Union Free School District, it's the longest, it's the longest plaintiff name, and there's no good way to shorten it, but it's a school district. It's actually, I live in Long Island. It's a Long Island school district, but it's called the Island Trees Union Free School District versus Pico, who was a student. Um, and that decision says local school boards cannot remove books from library shelves because they disagree with the ideas presented in the books. And Kate asks, does this have any standing in today's contentious library world? And the answer is yes. It is a Supreme Court decision that has not been overturned, that still stands. It's an interesting decision. It's what we call a plurality. So the justices have there's like some movement in the case. There's some justices that believe some and some things and some justices that believe others. So there's a bunch of concurrences and other pieces of decisions. But one thing that the case says, one thing we can all agree on is that there is a right to read. Students have a right to read in school, no matter what their age, and that it is unconstitutional to deprive them of that right, right? I will say that one of the issues with the Llano County case, that Texas case where the opinion or where the Supreme Court decided not to hear it, so the decision is still in place in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. That case does try to assert or insinuate that PICO is not good law, but that is not the case. If the Supreme Court had taken up the case and said, you know what, we're going to overturn PICO or PICO no longer, that would be a different situation, but the Supreme Court did not. So yes, PICO still exists, even with the existence of Llano, and it still has standing. And until we hear otherwise, students, minors, school attendees have rights to read. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And
And
Jill had her hand up there with another question, I think.
Yeah, so I wonder in this case what we expect the immediate effects of this decision or lack of decision to be. Are there going to be more lawsuits on behalf of Llano County, or is this it? And how do you see the libraries in those states sort of taking on the ramifications?
yeah, that's a really good question. And there are a lot of unknowns right now, which is why everybody's so uncomfortable because we don't like being in a situation where we're not in stasis when things are in flux and we're just not sure. But there have been a series of circuit court cases, so cases below the Supreme Court that have been kind of on pause, waiting for this to happen, waiting to see what would happen in Llano. So what's going to happen now is those cases are going to start moving through the circuit courts, and we don't know what each circuit court is going to decide. So there's one of two possibilities. These circuit courts could resolve the cases and say, you know what, we're going to go along and do what Lano did, or what the Fifth Circuit did. We agree with the Fifth Circuit, so we're going to have that. Or they could do what we call a circuit split. They could say, we don't agree with that, and we're going to hold our own way. The thing about circuit courts, there are 11 circuit courts that cover different regions of the United States. They don't have to agree with one another. What happens in one circuit doesn't bind all the other circuits. The only court that can bind all of the circuits is the Supreme Court. So there is a chance, a non-zero chance, that these these cases will continue to be resolved in different circuits. They'll vary from one another, and then one of those cases will go up to the Supreme Court again, and we will be in this situation again in a few years. And in that case, the Supreme Court may feel more emboldened or pressured to actually take the case because there will be a stronger circuit split, right? There will be confusion. Because if you think about it, Lano and it letting the Fifth Circuit stand has already created confusion. It's created a patchwork of First Amendment rights in the United States, right? Library users in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana now have fewer First Amendment rights than the rest of this nation, right? And that is not how constitutional rights are supposed to be applied, right? So there's a good chance that, I mean, this definitely isn't over. We are still working on a multiplicity of circuit court cases, and there's a chance that we could see this in the Supreme Court again before too long.
Sarah, you have wonderful power here. There's a rare moment of no questions in there. What are the themes you think we ought to be looking at as advocates in terms of how the law puts us in a position to make a positive difference in our communities?
So let me see what I have. I can talk about different things that do you want to know about different things that people are doing and that you can do? Does that feel good? Yeah, I feel like generally people like to take action and like to do things. So, one entity that I think Deborah mentioned it, we have something called Unite Against Book Bans and Unite for Libraries. So if you're on a board or a trustee or involved in like a friends group for a library system, you can get involved that way. And if you are a citizen or a library worker or part of Unite for, if you're part of any of these entities, you can do things that are linked to Unite Against Book Bans, which has a lot of positive, it's a huge coalition that has a lot of positive campaigns. So that is one action item. Go check out Unite Against Book Bans. Pauline asked if the people of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi know their rights have taken a hit. So that's something you could do if you're interested. You could work with advocates in those states and raise awareness. You could raise awareness in your state about what is happening in that state. So much of this work is just about letting people know, because we all know because we're in libraries, right? And we assume that everybody knows what's going on in libraries. Do you know who thinks about libraries? No, nobody's thinking. Like, we are the ones who know about libraries. So it is incumbent upon us to let people know about what we care about and what we're concerned about. So yeah, raising the attention of people who aren't affiliated or involved with the library world. Exactly, right. Yeah, everybody, people know a lot about freedom of speech, but people know less about the right to read and about why the right to access and receive information is so important and so fundamental to democracy. So, anything you can do to spread that kind of awareness, give talks about it, brush up on the topic and give talks about it in your own community and speak up about it in your own community. Even if there's nothing going on in your community right now, right? Because then there'll be 100 more advocates in your home community that will be in the world talking about how important the freedom to read is. Yeah, and okay, so one thing that we do, and we've done in years past, I don't know if we'll do it this year, but we do it like for Right to Read Day, we've had postcard writing campaigns, and I'll tell you when I go to ALA Central Office, there are always some postcards, and I love it so much. So send postcards in support of libraries and library workers and people doing this work. It means a lot. And it's also an activity that raises awareness about the issue in your community, right? Because people will be like, what are you doing? And then you can talk about it. So that is a wonderful thing you can do. Um, and celebrating people's stories, kind of what Pauline was saying about hosting drag queen story hours or, making sure that there's a diverse collection, in your new releases section or whatever it is, right? Um, really making sure that everybody in your community is represented and sees themselves in your collections and that you don't shy away from, making sure that everybody in your community's needs are met, even with all the fear tactics and strategies that are being employed against us. Yeah. So, and yeah, and lobby and talk to your lawmakers. And Deborah mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Deborah said something that I think is really, really good to think about. Different types of people have different levers of power. So, friends groups have the ability to advocate in a way that library workers can't, right? And library workers can advocate in ways that the board of education can't, right? So we all have different ways we can exercise power in the library ecosystem, in the freedom to read world. And so think about, where is your power? Where can you be most effective? What can you lend to the efforts?
Let's go back to Deborah on this because we've kind of danced around United for Libraries quite a bit in our conversation here. Deborah, you want to give a quick description of how an advocate looking for a place to be effective might find that place in United for Libraries?
Certainly, United for Libraries. And we are not just a group of friends and foundations, but we have publishers on our board. We have people who we can kind of move more quickly sometimes than libraries can. And it's always, I think, an important thing to bring civilians to some of those meetings. This is right about the time that people should be thinking about talking to their legislators at all levels about library funding. Is there going to be funding at the federal level for libraries when they try to figure out something about the budget? And that will sprinkle down to the states. And since California gets the most funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, it's really important for us to pay attention to whether we're getting those dollars. So it's great to talk to your legislators as an individual. It's also great to get to know their local staff. Get to know the local staff, get to know the local staff of your local legislators, because I would venture to say that a lot of your local politicians are running for higher office. And so you want to get them when they're young. You want you want to make sure that they are clear about what libraries are doing for them. What are libraries doing for them? It's not the oh please, we need your support, which we do, but the best argument is this is what libraries are doing for people who vote for you. These are the things that we do with the little money that we have right now. And think of the things that we could do if we did have more funding. And think of how important intellectual freedom has been in your career to those politicians. Do the research. We're librarians. We can do the research. We could figure out which ones, where are the connections? We have connections with every legislator because libraries have all kinds of information. That's the kind of stuff that we can do. And I'm sorry, I'm babbling. But you can work in groups, you can work individually, but it's not, when you talk to the legislators and when you talk to the people who are in powerful positions in your community, it's not a once a year thing. It's developing relationships, just like you have relationships with, and talk to your trustees, your library advisory boards. They want to do things. They really do want to do things. And tell you, if your friends are only doing book sales, there's something wrong. Your friends should be your strongest advocates. I'm telling you. Is that enough, Paul?
Yeah, that's great. Let's go one step further on today's topic. Are there any legal cases that United for Libraries is involved in where library advocates might find a home working with you?
Is that for me?
That's for you.
We're always looking for people at United for Libraries. We're also looking for people at California Public Library Advocates, which is a statewide organization. And we can help people learn how to write letters to their legislators, to write emails to their legislators. We could do all that kind of thing. I do think that freedom to read, though, is really important, and they're always looking for people. I'm on a working group that looks at legislation all over the country, and so we're looking at the states where some of these weird laws are popping up, and if it's been successful someplace, then they might try to make it work here. Um, uh, so if you have interest in legislation, some people do, some people don't. I'll put my email in if you're interested in anything that I've mentioned. I'll put my email in the chat, and please get in touch.
And go ahead and give your email audibly for those people that are listening or viewing the archive recording.
Zora, that's Z as in zebra, ORRAH at Gmail. Zora@gmail.com.
Thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
I mean, what could I possibly add?
Oh, there's so much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Well, let's
happy.
look forward in the upcoming year, given what we've seen in 2025 in terms of challenges and advocates trying to find a place where they can be effective. What are a few steps you would recommend to an advocate saying, I feel overwhelmed. Help me feel less overwhelmed?
Um, I guess, yeah, if I was somebody who had just become interested in this and I was going into 2026 with like, let's say my New Year's resolution was like, I am going to fight against censorship in libraries, right? I would first familiarize myself with the territory. So be aware that there's like a lot of kind of keywords and we throw terms around, we throw case names around, right? But you need to give yourself space to become familiar, right? So go read read about censorship on ALA's website, on Penn's website, on, get familiar. And then I know that like every library, Penn America, we track legislation in all the states. Now, if you're just coming into 2026, you're in great shape because most states' legislative sessions have not started yet, right? So you can prepare yourself uh for the upcoming legislative session, which I don't know when yeah, it'll start soon enough and then we'll all be off to the races. But you have this kind of calm before the storm when where you can really decide what states you want to focus on or what issue you want to focus on and explore our legislation trackers and see what kind of laws or legislation that we've noticed. And then once the legislative session starts, interact as much, interact with people on the ground um, in the various jurisdictions and see if they need any help. It's hard because legislation is so state specific that sometimes like Idaho doesn't need your help, right? But if there's like a rally and you could show up or, you have friends in that state, right? So it becomes kind of outside, they always say that like when somebody is affected, you should support in towards them. They're like the center and everybody support in, right? Give them whatever resources they need, help them however they need help, which will vary. And just be a loud advocate, show up with, I know like this week on Monday, Penn America had an event in New York City. Go. If you're in, not if you're in California, but like if there's something going on and you can get there, go to the thing. Exactly, Pauline. That's why I don't encourage you to intervene where a state wouldn't want you to or where a state association wouldn't want you to. That's why I said care inward, see what they need and give that to them. And if they say we don't need anything right now, then they'll take care of it, right? And we see that a lot. We in Office for Intellectual Freedom, we get a lot of cases where we, asks for support, and we do it on a confidential basis. And a lot of times, location, particular libraries, particular towns, they don't want outside assistance, right? They feel like they are in the best position to manage this, and that outsiders will actually harm the situation. So do be careful and be cautious and do ask the person at the center, right? The person you are caring for, ask what they need. and then do what they do. Don't do if they say we don't need your help, don't help. Like don't do it. Don't do the thing they tell you not to do. Yeah.
What Sarah's really responding to here is Pauline's comment in the chat about how do we not be accused of being outside agitators. So that's that whole thing of make sure before you go in, you know that they want you.
Yeah. Oh, and Deborah said legislative day will be in DC next spring and we can participate from the field too. Yeah. Keep abreast of CLA, ALA, right? All of your associations, they'll have training days and retreats and conferences and opportunities. So if you can go, and if you can't afford funding, see if you can get sponsorship or some sort of travel grant, etc. You'd be surprised. Those types of resources are available.
Along the same lines, the Ursula Meyer series every year does some sort of a training session online, generally in February or March, tied into the California effort called Day in the District. And that's a chance for you to get involved in actually going to your district legislator, going with other people, organizing yourself, and bringing in, well, again, what Deborah has called the civilians, as well as the professional paid people from library industries to make sure that you're talking with the legislators. But the underlying message here, folks, is make it year round. Do not wait until the moment when you really need something. It's a basic precept that I come across over and over again. If you're more interested in that kind of training on a day in the district kind of project, we have at least a couple of recordings on the Ursula Meyer site. You might look back there and look in February or March of the last few years, and we will do another one in 2026.
Yeah. And you can help people. You can always help make sure libraries have good policies in place. That takes a little bit of learning, but you'd be surprised at how often we get we hear that a library is having some sort of censorship situation. We're like, oh, but did you follow the policy or did they follow the policy? And they're like, oh, we don't have a policy. So make sure all the libraries in your world have good book reconsideration policies, good collection development policies, et cetera, et cetera.
Can't emphasize enough what Sarah's just said. I worked in the Human Resources Division at San Francisco Public for a while, basically doing training and volunteer services, but also looking a little bit at how HR things worked. And one of the basic things we always did with our orientations for new staff or people that were moving up in the hierarchy there was have them sit down and become aware of what the policies and procedures are. As managers, especially, will sometimes get so tied up not understanding that they're trying to recreate something that already exists. And if they just were familiar with the policies, it would be easier. So you as an advocate, before you get involved in these legal cases and advocating on behalf of them, ask around with people that are knowledgeable what's already in place and what are we working with. Jill, you had your hand up.
Yeah, collection development policy reminds me of this sort of back and forth we're having here at the CSU, which happens a lot, which is that the librarians come up with a policy and then it gets forwarded up to be reviewed by CSU legal counsel, which of course never has time. So we have a couple of these things. This came up with we were trying to get a takedown policy put up on our digital archives, which really standard, just if something on here is offensive, this is our policy, please contact us. So I wonder, this would be a great thing for like minor legal services that maybe ALA could think of providing, that if we've got an organization like a small library or like a big library that just, we don't have enough legal counsel that legal's ever going to have time to review these things, especially as they become more of a legal concern. Things like collection development and takedown policies would be a really helpful resource that ALA could provide, I think.
Yeah, and we do. So we already have we have like policy making toolkits and Q&As and things like that. As I said, our website's a bit swamped right now, but they are there. However, it would be like having more really specific lessons about how to make policies and review them I agree, would be great. With the caveat that the one reason we don't get more specific is because sometimes the various rules differ by state, right?
Right.
Like I don't know the best. You would have to have a lawyer in California look at that, right? So, but if you could get your policy, if you could get all your policy ducks in a row, except for those state specific things, that would get you, 90% of the way there. So yeah, that is a wonderful thing to consider. And if somebody ever has a huge policy, well, it doesn't even have to be huge, it can be small. If anybody ever has a policy question, they can always reach out to ALA, to OIF also. So yeah, but we always say that like before you implement your policy, like put it on your website and finalize it, run it by a lawyer in your state. And so it's a pain to hear that like your general counsel's like, oh, we'll do it when we get to it.
Yeah, and it's understandably low on the list. Maybe this is something that the California Library Association could look into, helping each other with these things.
That'd be
For those that aren't aware of it, California Library Association has a wonderful lobbyist that works for us in Sacramento, keeps us apprised of what's going on, uh, asks for support when there is something that we need to either be supporting or opposing. So that is one element. Now let's move this quickly into, Sarah, some resources for people that want to go further than what we've talked about today. Let me start obviously with the pitch for CLA. If you're in California and you're interested in libraries at all, membership in CLA strengthens us and strengthens you. You become part of an organization that is strong in advocacy and gives you a launch pad to address some of the issues that are important to you and offers you the kind of trainings we do through Ursula Meyer and through the annual conferences we do. So look at CLA and let us know where we can engage you to be more active with us. And look at our website. Go back to those training videos that I've been mentioning to you over and over again on the CLA website under Ursula Meyer Training Program, whole playlist there. Sarah, 2 or 3 online resources you would suggest people go to if they want to further delve into library advocacy in the law?
good question. So I would visit Unite Against Book Bans. I would visit their resources. They have a lot of great resources. The Freedom to Read website also. Um, and we are about to launch a Law for Librarians website as well. So lawforlibrarians.org, I think, or .org, I believe, will be active soon, and it will have a lot of like one sheets, news updates about different legal things, and it'll link to ALA's legislative tracking and hopefully FTRS case law tracking as well. So more resources coming soon, but in the meantime, yeah, ALA's website is mammoth and huge, but there's a lot of little gems hidden in there, like the policy resources and the Bill of Rights resources, and little like blog posts and informational pieces about First Amendment law in libraries, displays in libraries, meeting rooms in libraries, First Amendment audits in libraries, just all sorts of school libraries, minors in libraries.
I was going to question about, is there a Discord server for CLA members? I'm not aware of one. Deborah, are you aware of anything like that?
No.
No, I don't think we've got there yet, Bob. We've got a very small staff. It's mostly part-time. But again, if that's something that would be of value to you, hit me up with a follow-up email. I'm paul@paulsignorelli.com, or contact anybody at CLA that works there as part of the paid staff and say, can we do this? And just make a quick case for how that would be valuable. Thank you. I want to do a quick shout out here to Joyce McIntosh at Freedom to Read Foundation. Joyce is somebody that I met a few years ago and has been instrumental in bringing us programs toward the end of each year around the kind of issues that we're discussing today. Joyce put me in touch with Sarah, put me in touch with, let me get the name right, Mackenzie Ledley, which is our lead into next month in January. We'll start the year with Mackenzie, again from Joyce, on a program around solutions for rural advocacy. It's not up for registration yet on the website, but should be up within the next 2 or 3 days. It's a confirmed event. It'll be the second Wednesday of January, starting 10 a.m. Pacific time. And in February, delighted to say that we're going to have Patrick Sweeney back, I think for the 4th consecutive year now. Patrick is one of those great people with every library. And every year he comes in and kind of gets us jump started on where are the big issues and what can we do to make a difference. And we were trying to design something new for 2026. Patrick came up with Library Advocacy 2026. What are we doing wrong and how can we fix it? So hope that you'll be there. He's a great thinker. He's a wonderful presenter, very engaging, and that's your chance to be there for Patrick. And we're lining up other programs right now for March, April, and May of 2026. So if you like what you saw today, come back. If you didn't like what you saw today, I'm really sorry because we did our best and we will keep trying. For those of you on the live call, hang with us after we stop the recording, please. We always do a quick debrief to make sure that we just know what was good and what we can do better for upcoming sessions. And if you're watching these sessions, feel free to reach out to me again, paul@paulsignorelli.com. Let me know what we can be doing to provide information about advocacy for these workshops or speakers that you think we ought to be bringing in. We're always open to new ideas. Sarah, toughest question in the whole world. You've had 90 minutes with us now. What would be the 2 or 3 strongest tips you would give to people, knowing people are only going to remember 2 or 3 things that we all said. What are the essentials of library advocacy in the law as a wrap up?
Show up, right? Get involved, just do it. Get up. If you're feeling shy or whatever, just don't come hang out with us. Um, Definitely keep updated as much as you can on what's going on because the censorship game is always changing. There's always new um, attempts at different types of things. One of the things that I was just talking about this earlier today, censorship is not popular. People like liberty and people like their libraries and people like choosing what to read. So they constantly there constantly has to be all these changes, right? They're always trying different ways. So keep up, know what's going on and never hesitate to reach out, right? Whether it's ALA or, Patrick or Penn America or whoever, CLA has resources as well. Just if you see something, say something when it comes to censorship, because we are all here and ready to help.
David or Deborah, any last minute thoughts from you in terms of what you hope people remember about library advocacy in the law based on what we did today?
I think Sarah's covered it nicely, nicely. Thank you.
And I'm hearing nothing from David, so I assume that this is one of those rare times when David doesn't have something to add. That's unbelievable, David. I'm so shocked and disappointed. Next month we'll be stronger with you. All right, everybody, that pretty much wraps us for the December 25, I think I got the year right, December 2025 session of Ursula Meyer. Hope you've had a great year with us. Hope you have another good one coming up. And again, those of you that want to stay with us for the post debrief, as soon as Karen stops recording, we'll do this. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And Karen, we can cut the recording here.